things that I know Andrea has pointed out. Snow removal was, I mean,
Whoa.
yeah,
Ooh. Wow.
we had kind of talked about that
Yeah.
at the commercial meeting as well. I think there is some level of a learning curve, but I also think that the way the property, at least in filing one, um, or excuse me, filing two, is oriented, we're just having the snow never melts. It's always in shade. Um, we're trying to avoid using product on new concrete, which comes with its own challenges. So this is just something I'm hopeful in meeting with Miller Landscaping. I think Melissa, that was a couple, maybe last week or so that we all got together and, noted some issues. I know Bessler is well aware, and just kind of coming up with a strategic game plan of product versus snow removal. And I think most importantly, storage locations that we discussed for snow to get it up, out, and off property. Well, off into common area, not off property. And so I'm not overly surprised with the amount of private alleyways that are there for um, snow removal, but that was probably our biggest bust in terms of budgeted expenses. And we got a heck of a lot of snow this year. I don't think anybody would argue with that.
And 181,000 is the potential expenses, and what's the potential income? 87.
187.
187.
And that, Fred, that includes a assumption that the commercial district will transfer $110,000 over.
That's,
I think that's right.
That's free money, right? Does that get paid back?
It does not for operations.
What if we don't put the money up? This is the commercial.
Then the residential district would not have sufficient funds to pay for its operations.
So they then, what do? Come up with money out of their own pocket or what? Special assessment, yeah.
We would have to do a fee.
Mm-hmm.
Special assessment, right?
And that would be, I think one of the things there's a lot of moving pieces from my perspective. Filing 2 townhomes have a budget. Filing 3 townhomes have a budget. The flats at Lupton Village will have a budget. Each of those budgets take into consideration the maintenance associated with private property outside of the district. I think there's two mechanisms at hand that the board would need to discuss and consider. The first is adjusting any of those quarterly fees that any of those filings pay associated with their private improvements. And the other mechanism would be a globalized metro district snow removal, or not even snow removal, just a globalized district operations and maintenance fee. I do believe, just in my kind of perusal of where we've reached income to expenses, I think the single family homes tax revenue, though not great enough to cover their operations and expenses currently, will certainly get there based on our projections for tax collections in the future when it's completely built out and fully assessed. But reevaluating some of the contributions from the high maintenance communities, the different townhome filings, that could be considered by the board going into next year. But to answer your question very directly, Fred, and Michael, correct me from a legal perspective, if the commercial district doesn't contribute, those would be the 2 options we would have: an O&M fee for the district or increasing individual fees for the different filings for private improvement maintenance.
So the commercial district's going to subsidize the residential by over 100 grand this year and be expected to do the same thing next year because it's not going to have enough rooftops the next year to cover all the O&M fees, right?
That is correct. I mean, the magnitude of what that number looks like is something that our team is working on as request from the last meeting. And once we have our heads wrapped around what that number looks like, we can give projections. But yes is the answer to your statement.
So we could be looking at 200,000 or 250,000. We don't know yet.
Correct.
Subsidy to the residential people that live there,
Correct.
for them to live there. And not have to come up with money out of their pockets.
Correct.
Wonderful.
Ho, ho, ho.
Merry Christmas.
It's yeah, it's not uncommon by any means, but I think I appreciate your comments tremendously because I think it's one thing that is very much misunderstood and not completely like compartmentalized by the folks living there. And that's one of the things that I know I get really excited about is the education piece and having conversations with homeowners about how we get from a vacant piece of land that Bessler purchased to the beautiful home that they live in 10 years from now. And I think that process by which the district goes through is of critical importance. And I think we could all do better in educating community members at a whole. But I'll get off my soapbox now. I apologize.
That's not a loan, that is a gift, the way I'm looking.
For operations, you are correct.
So making it affordable by dropping the lot prices and stuff, and we still have to subsidize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a good looking, but Fred, it's a good looking neighborhood now.
Yeah. With that and a quarter, I still can't buy a cup of coffee. Okay. All right.
So I think at this point, I would open the floor to any other questions regarding today's financials. Otherwise, we can move on to item 3 and discuss ratification of payment of claims.
When do we have to approve this budget? Because this
So the-
budget, this is kind of like a US budget. We're spending way more money than we have coming in. I mean, that's what we're doing here is we're basically making money. We're printing money.
Oh, we're giving them.
Yeah, but it's coming from someone else's pockets. Right? I mean, are we approving this budget today?
So Fred, you've already approved the budget for 2023. What we're doing here is just looking at a snapshot of where we are. So this is just the quarterly financials through the end of March. So we don't ask the board to approve these or take any, I mean, you can take action if you wanted to change something, but we don't ask you to approve these. This is just for your review update. We never ask you, the board, to approve any financials until they're audited financials. We'll have the 2022 audited financials probably sometime in May or June. Andrea may know more precisely when we'd have 2022, but this is just unaudited financials for your information is what we're doing here.
All right.
We're assuming this is pretty accurate then, Andrea?
Yes.
Through the end of March.
So no surprises. I hate surprises.
Well, the snow removal is the surprise.
Yep.
Well, that's true. That is very true. That we can't predict. But other than that, it should be tracking.
And I think just to reiterate Fred's point, because it's a good one, is the board in 2022 for the 2023 year approved a budget based upon intergovernmental revenue of $110,000. Take that for what it may, but we would have had to at that time consider a different revenue source for that 110. Currently, it's listed as intergovernmental revenue between commercial and residential, a gift. You're absolutely right. But that was kind of the decision making of the board at that time to move us into 2023. So the two surprises, if you will, one of which shouldn't have been, is the revenue that is requested via the budget from the other government that we have an agreement with, and then the snow removal that went over budget by about $10,000.
So we have to encourage Andy to sell more houses so we have more rooftops to cough up more money. So get to work, Andy.
I think that's always the the walk, because at some point developers got to get off the hook, or in this case, the commercial. So you're always balancing with increasing fees for the homeowners, and what's that revenue source. So I like to get to the point where we're at, Fred, BJ, and then just really look at all the costs. And I think in the fall we look at it and say, okay, what are these costs? What costs do we have to have? And then really address, if there's costs that we have to have, then we have to look at increasing fees or feeing one time just to get us back in this spot where it's good.
Mhm.
Well, thank God we have oil and gas tax revenue coming in.
Yep.
This residential metro district would be in pain right now. They've shifted the pain to other people.
It is fortunate for this district to have that opportunity. That is true. It's no longer the case for new districts. So that's.
But that's a regular vote. That's just not a given.
Correct.
And I might add, thanks to our council, Michael, the governor is keeping the taxes in Fort Lupton.
I didn't have anything to do with that.
That was brutal, BJ. The communities that I manage that have oil and gas revenue are so much fun because we make so much of an impact in those communities based on that revenue, and they're the ones that are having to deal with the externalities, the noise associated with some of those, and so I'm grateful that this district has the opportunity to benefit from that. Just understand new districts no longer have that opportunity based on legislation. So with that, think we close the unaudited financial statement discussion. Are there any other questions?
I think I understand where we're at, or where they're at. This metro district, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
All right. So going on to payment of claims for Lupton Village Residential. I can run through these individually. I will kind of take them in chunks to begin with, and if we need to dial into any of the individual questions, happy to do so. CCG, that's obvious. It's our flat fee payment amount with associated direct costs that were outlined on our invoices. City of Fort Lupton, that's going to be utilities, IDES for the services they've provided the district and certifying costs associated with public improvements. Law office, district council, that's obvious. Leo Landscape, they are the snow removal provider as well as the maintenance contractor for the district in the single family portion of the community. T. Charles Wilson is the insurance broker who ensured that we had proper coverage for the district moving into 2023 with the Colorado Special Districts pool. United Power, obvious utility, and that basically exhausts our payables in front of you today for ratification, and I would open the floor to discussion.
Will snow removal be bid out to multiple contractors then annually if that's such a huge portion?
Yes, sir. I've had some experience in different communities. A lot of times I've found it difficult to get a contractor to take snow removal without the maintenance contract. That's not something that they love to do. I've got FLM did it for me a couple times, and I've been grateful for that. Otherwise, it's kind of a package deal. But my intent would be to have multiple maintenance contract bids that would include snow costs. And the snow costs, I can't stress it enough, is a per event hourly rate. And Andy, Melissa, you guys might have additional experience than I have, but when I really look across the hourly expenses, hourly costs of snow removal across pretty much you name the contractor, there's going to be $5 differences here and there. But if you actually just run out a snowstorm, it's pretty industry standard for that. It's just a matter of how much snow we get and if it's easy for them to move it. And in the townhome filings, it's narrow, it's shady, and it's challenging for sure. But I think we'll we'll look at as many contractors as the board would like.
Okay.
If there are no questions, comments, concerns on the ratification of claims, I would entertain a motion in a second.
I move we pay or approve these
Budget.
budgeted items.
Thank you, Fred. Second,
I'll second it.
EJ. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none. Item 4, reviewing the cash position. We touched on that when we were going over the financials. Generally speaking, and Andrea will have to step on me because I'm not good with accrual basis accounting by any stretch of the imagination, but I do believe our cash position is approximately $23,000 as of March 31st.
Okay.
It's a roll up of all the cash, including the cash that belongs to, if you will, the townhomes areas. So if you go to their individual financial statements, you'll see a difference.
And I think that's one thing worth noting just for the residents in attendance. So if we call it filing 1, the single family homes in the district, filing 2 townhomes are the townhomes that are all but completed there in the community. Filing 3 are well underway getting started. And then lastly, it'll be the flats at Lupton Village, which will be kind of across the railroad tracks. I was out there the other day checking that out. All of that is handled separately from a bookkeeping perspective, but because there is not a separate HOA, everything's housed by the district. They're just essentially district funds, different funds of the district. So everything's kept separately. The fees you pay for the expenses associated with those areas are tracked separately, just so you're aware. And if there's questions or comments on that, please reach out to our office and we can share that information with you. But I think it's worth noting.
Alex, the townhome fees for all those, for the 3 or 4 different filings, does it all get pooled together, or does each townhome filing keep its own money for its own snow removal?
They have their own bank accounts. Alex, go down to the Lupton Village filing 2.
Sure will.
And is that common to do it that way, to keep them all separate, as opposed to pooling it all together and say all the townhomes throughout the whole development kind of share that money for snow removal, whoever, right? Because one townhome might have a little more snow than another. Or is it typical to keep them in separate funds?
Well, what you've essentially done, Michael, is you've set up reserves for each of these, whereby their money needs to be kept separate to pay for their own private repairs. So that it's like it functions like an HOA, but it's still part of the metro. Go to the balance sheet on that one, Alex. I think you went one too many pages.
I'm sorry.
So the $11,808.10 that you see here is just from the money that's paid by the filing 2 townhomes units. That $36.53 is their contribution to their reserves for their private improvements.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, each group of townhomes pay their own way. They don't share money between the townhome groups. And
Correct.
That's typical experience. And Andy, that's
no, this is not typical in any experience I've had. Typically, there's an HOA separate for each of these townhomes areas.
But an HOA would keep money separate like this too, or would the HOA
Yes.
all together?
Mm-hmm. And so I think just for general clarity purposes, is the timing of filing 2, hypothetically, they might need a capital improvement for their private infrastructure, being primarily the alleyways, sooner than the flats. And so I think for matter of just understanding, it does not quite make sense for the flats to be paying for private improvements that benefit only a specific filing. And so we'd like to keep that separate. And I think furthermore, it's the protection to the district board that we are not utilizing public funds, aka tax revenue, to improve private infrastructure. So what we need to ensure that fees that we are collecting from the different townhome filings go directly into their own private improvements. Start crossing tax revenue with the fees, we put ourselves in a position that might get a little bit uncomfortable for specific private improvements that aren't owned by the district. Well, they're owned by the district, but they're not public improvements. It's, yeah.
The district, if you will. Yeah,
I just didn't realize we were keeping separate funds. I don't have a problem with it, but I haven't done a lot of research in this area, but I think arguably if it made sense to put it all in one pool, that could be researched, and I can see that working, right? The position would be all of these townhomes are in the same, they're all in the same district, and all of that money, the money would have to be set aside only for the townhome areas. But there's certainly nothing wrong with doing it this way. I'm not sure it's the only way it could be done, but and maybe this works fine.
it's the most transparent way to do this, so each
It is, yep.
townhomes area can see their own money that they've contributed to their fees and what that pays. If you go to the claims for ratification there, for filing two, Alex. Now, there you go. That's the bills that have been paid by the filing two fees since the last time we met, which wasn't a lot.
I would agree. It's very transparent to each association.
Yeah.
There's three sections.
Yeah, they're not associations, but yes, they are essentially treated like an association.
And I feel a bit strongly about that because I think as we get homeowners on the residential metro board, for them to be able to have the autonomy to listen to certain constituents and certain filings, that they want to make a change in the trash provider, or they want to make a change in the snow removal provider. This would allow that autonomy, and allow people to make separate decisions for themselves. And I think there comes a day, from my perspective, Fred, there comes a day where each blanket of townhomes might have different expectations and might have a higher tolerance for higher fees for better service, or lower fees for lesser service. And I think this allows them to then kind of have those discussions, present to the board, and make those decisions, and not commingle them all into the same standard. Just my 2 cents.
I would say, given my experiences after 50 some years of being a licensed professional, having seen the real estate commission get involved in HOAs and controlling a lot of that, they're going to force this to happen anyway, because someone's going to sue them and say, how come you're not doing it this way? I think this is great.
Cool.
I think this kind of transparency is going to be required in the future. So why not start with it now? It makes it a lot easier than changing it later.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate that feedback, Andrea. I take zero credit. Job well done. And Michael, if you and Andrea need to communicate offline, by all means. But I think we're on the right track. At least I hope so.
Go through the filing three financials real quick too there, Alex.
Yeah. No
Again,
problem.
that's the money from the filing three fees that has been collected. That's their own cash account. You'll notice they have not started building reserves yet. That'll happen before the end of this year because they just started selling homes in 2023. But they pay their own bills for their own subcontractors, if you will. They're all contracted with the district, but they are contracted to provide services in that area. And then I don't know if they've paid any bills or not, but you can look at their claims.
I think there were none. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just for, I think, everybody's collective benefit, everyone's collective benefit, our team, thanks to Kirsty in our office for payables, requires that if we get any invoice that is gray in any way of just like which filing, which area did this pertain to, she gets clarity. gets it delineated on the invoice, we pay it accordingly, and off we go. So there's kind of a two-step process here. Because a lot of them have the same contractors, whether it be Best Cleaner Disposal, Miller Landscaping. We ensure that the invoices that we receive for them are for a particular geographic area or by filing. Again, just trying to increase transparency.
Perfect. Appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, I have no problem with this. I think it's very transparent. So I'll defer. Sounds like it's working. So
Yeah, I think I really look forward to next budgeting year. We'll have some water under the bridge, if you will, in terms of the different filing expenses. We'll also have hopefully higher tax revenues, and we can really dial into those individual filing 2, filing 3, the flats budgets, and make sure that the fees that they're paying are covering the costs associated with maintaining those properties. And I'm not suggesting that they have to go up. I think it's just really dialing them in to make sure that we're paying for the services that are provided to those communities. And I'll kind of leave it at that. That was the cash position conversation. Is there anything else for item 4? Otherwise, I would turn it over to Michael for the remaining legal matters.
I'm sorry, Alex, my last comment on this would be, I appreciate you doing this. I didn't realize it was working this way, but like I said, I'm fine with it. You made one comment though, that I think maybe we should clarify is even though each of the townhome subgroups have their own budgets, so to speak, there is one board and one board would make the decisions. So we don't want to go down the road of each townhome group can go do their own contract for snow removal. There is one board that governs all of this. You just have 3 different funds of buckets of money to pay for the contract, but we're not splitting up the district into subgroups of the districts here.
I think Alex was talking about committees from each of those areas to.
And I'm not, unless the board chose to do that somehow, there's no such thing as a committee. Right? The public comes to the meetings, the public can make comments, the board makes the decision. There's no such thing as a committee for this townhome groups, unless a future board created those committees. But the residents are all the same within the district. So it's a homogeneous thing with one board. But
Correct.
You have 3 different funds. So
crystal clear. And I think if I misstated, thank you, Michael. My hope would be that if there was a filing 2 group of individuals that arrived at public comment and requested a change from the board, that the board would have the necessary documentation available to them to acquiesce that request if the board was so willing. And I hope that we have a variety of board members from all, we got 5 board members. Hopefully someday it'll work out where we've got some representation from everywhere based on how the votes line up. But that's kind of my hope, is just giving everybody the board the ability to allow a different filing to make a decision if the public comment warrants that change. I'm sure I didn't put it very well, but that was my hope.
And I'm sorry to kind of harp on it, but just to so we all kind of get on the same page. This is not an HOA.
Correct.
So I can see in an HOA, groups of people in different neighborhoods might vote differently in their own interests. This is a government, and not to I think the way you're doing it is great here, but I think there's actually a very valid argument to say, as a government, as a board of the entirety of this district, these funds benefit all of the townhomes. And if there was a necessity to pool all the money because one part of the townhomes is shadier and has more snow and more difficult to remove the snow, and another part is sunnier and doesn't need as much, we're going to use that money in a pool to remove the snow. I think if at some point you ever needed to take that position, I think there's a valid position to be taken. It's like you're the city of Fort Lupton. The city of Fort Lupton doesn't say this neighborhood has a pool of money to remove snow and this other neighborhood doesn't. It's the city of Fort Lupton. This is the residential metropolitan district. It is a government. It is not an HOA. And I think it's very important to keep remembering that. Future board members have a fiduciary duty to the entirety of the boundaries of the property, not the neighborhood in which they live, right? So it is not an HOA, and it's a difficult thing for people to kind of wrap their heads around. This is a government, and everyone has a fiduciary duty to move the snow from the entirety of the district boundaries. So again, I don't have a problem at all with the way you've set these funds up. I think it's transparent. I think it's great as long as it keeps working. But at such time that the shady townhomes don't have enough money to move snow, I could make an argument that you could take the money that the other townhomes had paid to move the snow. So just keep that in mind for the future.
100% agree, and I look forward to the residents making that decision for the district.
Yep.
That'll be cool. Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Any other questions on financial related matters?
No,
Hearing none, Michael, I will turn item 5, ratify and approve the enforcement of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, over to you.
Sure. Okay. Do I have control? Can I get control of the screen?
See, last time I was so good about that. You will momentarily. You are good to go.
Doesn't seem to be working. Do I have to do something on my side?
I just made you a co-host, so you should be able to share. I will stop share.
Oh, okay. Oh, so I need to share my screen. Okay. Okay. Can you see the resolution now? Is it moving?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this resolution, it is primarily adding the flats to the covenants. Well, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Lupton land developers have already added the flats to the covenants. This is a resolution that we've passed, the board has adopted in the past for the district to enforce the covenants. So what this is doing is adding the flats to that resolution. In addition, though, I went back through it and I've added everything back into this. So it's ratifying the enforcement of covenants for the entirety of the community. And I did that. Melissa, you're on, so maybe double check that I did this right. But I've listed all of the filings, all of the declarations. So that's the original one, the PUD, the supplemental declaration, the second supplemental declaration, and the supplemental declaration and party wall agreement for the flats. So I think that's everything. And so what this resolution is doing is specifically saying we're going to enforce the covenants for the flats. That's the new piece of this. But we're enforcing these covenants for all of this property. Okay. And then to be very clear, what I've done is on this resolution, I've reattached the rules and regulations that the district enforces. These were approved, they were actually approved on July 8th of 2021, but they were made effective on June 18th, 2021. So I didn't change these at all, but I've reestablished them here in this resolution. So it's very clear to all of the residents that these rules, adopted June 18th, apply to the entirety of all the property that's identified in these declarations. Okay. The other thing, and Alex, I don't think I've done this before, but if you needed to do so, Alex, you can just take these, starting on page, whatever this is, page 5 of this resolution, and make that a standalone document, because these are the rules that apply to everybody. Okay.
Mhm.
And then again, I didn't make any changes here, but just so you're all aware, these rules and regs do give the district the authority to impose certain fines for violations of the covenants. And there's a whole process here for giving notice to residents if they're not complying with the covenants. and there's fees associated with those reminder letters, warning letters, demand letters, filing of liens. So if somebody isn't complying with the covenants, the district would have the authority and the ability under these rules to file a lien on their house and to enforce the enforcement of those covenants. So again, this was all adopted in June of 2021. You need to ever make changes to it, review them, change them, and it would have to go through board approval to amend, and you certainly could do that, but you could amend these rules and regulations as needed. Okay. So with that explanation, we have discussion or open the floor for a motion in a second, but I'm happy to answer questions about this. And certainly if we don't have it quite right here, this will be a great time to make corrections.
I just have a point of clarification, Michael.
Yeah.
This is strictly regarding the townhome, the 3 different phases of townhomes, or is it also the single family detached?
It's also the single family detached.
So it's
Correct.
the entirety of the residential community.
That's correct. And I didn't mention this actually sets up the formation of the Architectural Review Committee. Fred specifically, and that's what I was doing here. I think this first filing, the PUD, that would include the single family homes.
Okay.
And then these declarations and party wall agreements are for the townhomes. Okay. Melissa, did I capture everything here? Have I got it correct?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect. I have no other questions. Yes.
No, that seems pretty good.
Separately, there are documents. There are Architectural Review Committee guidelines for the single family homes. And then there's a second set of architectural review guidelines for the townhomes. Those have not changed. Alex and Melissa reviewed those, looked at them again the other day. We didn't have any changes, but Alex, you have both of those sets of guidelines for the Architectural Review Committee, correct?
And all of the ARC submittals are complete for all 4 phases of this, the single family, all 3 townhomes. And so later today, Alex, I'm going to send you a link with copies of all those submittals and approvals. So Centennial has that all in their files. You're muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, Alex, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that makes perfect sense because I know filing 2, filing 3, I feel really good about the guidelines, rules for flats. So we'll touch base outside of this, Melissa. Thank you.
If there are no other comments or questions, I would move for approval of this resolution.
I would
Is there
second.
a second? So Fred was first, BJ was second. All in favor?
Aye.
Right. Alex, I did have a question the other day. I think I sent you, when I was looking at these documents, there was somebody was supposed to be appointed to the Architectural Review Committee, and I didn't recognize the name. Do you know that person? Did you? I think it's you and Andy, and then one other person.
I was on the committee as well.
And Melissa, and then there was somebody else.
Because it was Melissa, Andy. I don't recall being. Well, let's put it this way. I lean on the committee where necessary, otherwise reviewed and then approved in accordance with the guidelines. If there's gray area, then I reach out to the committee, which I thought, Melissa, was some third person from your office as well. Melissa, Andy, and
Was it Mitch or Zach?
Mitch sounds correct, but it could have been Zach as well.
I think it was Zach.
Okay.
I think it was
Yep. So in the case, just
Zach Caesar or something like that. Is it Zach Caesar?
Yeah, Cesar.
Cesar, yeah.
Yeah.
He's on the committee. Yeah.
And so I think just for matter of process and for those in attendance to understand, I will get submissions, review those in accordance with the rules and regulations and covenants, If there is something that I am uncomfortable with or believe that I am not interpreting correctly in those guidelines, I will go immediately to the committee with that request. Doesn't happen very often, fortunately. People have abided by the rules, generally speaking, and haven't made anything overly complicated. But then they would reply comments to me as the committee. I would share those with the residents, and then we would hopefully come to a understanding of what is approvable and not. So that's kind of the process we're at right now. I am not a true committee member, but so long as the request is within the guidelines and covenants, we'll submit that approval accordingly. When there's a gray area, we involve the committee.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you for that. The next item on the agenda is the resolution to impose fees. Very similarly, this resolution is specifically imposing the townhome fees on the flats. But I've taken the opportunity to go ahead and reaffirm and ratify the imposition of these fees for all of the townhomes. And I went ahead and included the original PUD, but I don't think any of the fees actually, so I recited this just to kind of reiterate the entirety of the property, but then the definition of townhome properties, which is in here, townhome units, is limited to these filings, the townhomes in these 3 filings. So again, it's ratifying the imposition of the fees for everything and adding the flats. And I did not make any changes to the fees. So it's still $275 per calendar quarter. That's the same. And the whole process for paying the fees and delinquent balances. So none of this changed. So effectively, it's just adding the flats. So same, open the floor for conversation or discussion or a motion and a second to approve the imposition of fees.
So moved by Andrew Girk.
Second.
Second,
Fred, all in favor?
Fred,
Was that?
all in
Yeah,
favor?
seconded. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Guess I'll just say. Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. So just keep going, Alex.
Yes, sir.
I'd catch up.
Next item is just acknowledging the deed of property from Lupton Village residential, I'm sorry, from Lupton from FTL Land Assemblage, and then second from Lupton Village Land Developers. The conveyance of all of the outlots and tracks to the district. So I've included the deeds here from both of those private entities. And what you see then is FTL is conveying these tracks at no cost by way of the special warranty deed to the district. And Lupton Village Land Developers is conveying these outlots. I just sent Alex a map and a listing of all of these. So Alex, you'll now have a map. So all of the tracks, all of the landscaping tracks, the monumentation, the detention pond that used to be the residential district director's parcel, all of that is now district property. So you simply need an acknowledgement by the district. Why don't we go ahead and do, just to be very clear, a resolution, a motion and a second to acknowledge and approve the district's acceptance of these lots, of tracks, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Second? And all in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next item then is, because now the district owns all of this property, but the developers need to access the property, finish the improvements, the dog park, the landscaping, irrigation, finishing building out the property on these public areas. We have drafted an access license and temporary construction agreement for both FTL land assemblage and separately for Lupton Village land developers. This will allow those developers to go onto the district property that was just conveyed, finish all of the improvements. The license is good until the license becomes effective immediately, and these will stay in place until the later of either when all the warranties run out on the improvements, or the time that the developer completes all of the improvements and assigns the warranties to the district. That's when these licenses would end. Happy to answer any questions you might have about these, or entertain a motion and a second to approve the access license and temporary construction easements.
So moved, Andrew Girk.
You have a second?
Second, Fred.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And I think the last item is a resolution regarding notices for special meetings. So statutes, as you all know, require directors to file their conflicts 72 hours ahead of a meeting. The statutes then the statutes also require that a notice be made of meetings. So the directors can call a meeting, but there's, in my mind, sort of a gap in the statute that says that doesn't say at what point the director has to file that notice that they want to have a meeting. So theoretically, it'd be possible for a director to say, I want to have a meeting in 48 hours, which would not give the directors time to file their conflicts. So what this does is recites those statutes and says that there are no special meetings of the board may be called by any director or any manager or attorney of the district with less than 5 days notice. The intention of this is to make sure if you have conflicts to file, you have an opportunity to file them before a meeting. Any questions or comments? Otherwise, we'd entertain a motion and second for this resolution.
I'll move that we approve this resolution for the 5-day advance notice.
You have a second?
Seconded by Andrew Girk.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. And I think the last thing on the agenda might be item number 10 is really a discussion item. And this was just to point out or give the board a reminder, basically, that there is an IGA in place, the original IGA between the two districts for sharing of costs. It actually applies to both capital improvements as well as operations and maintenance. So as we just had the longer discussion earlier in this meeting, the commercial district is essentially funding the residential district, and it's pursuant to this IGA. That IGA, just to keep in mind, can be terminated by either district with 30 days notice. So I just threw this on as a discussion item, kind of as a reminder, at any time that the commercial district or the residential district determined that it was in their best interest to end that IGA, you simply need to provide 30 days notice to the other district. So with that, if there's any board discussion, you could consider, this is a residential district meeting, so you could consider terminating that IGA if the residential district decided not to receive funds from the commercial district for operations and maintenance. You could turn off the spigot if it chose to do so.
Michael, what is it right now? Just at any time?
30
I'm
days.
sorry? It's 30
Is it
days
just-
notice.
What is it right now?
I don't understand what is it right now?
Because aren't you saying consider a termination notice to make it 30 days, or is it already 30 days?
It's already 30 days. So again, this wasn't,
This is,
this was a discussion item, just to make
this is not an action.
aware of
item.
that.
You're just bringing it up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is not an act, this does not require a vote. This is just, you're
FYI.
informing us that we could cut the money off in 30 days. The commercial district against residential, or residential can say, we don't want any more money.
Exactly,
We want free money.
That'll happen.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So we talked a lot about the other IGA and the moving of money and the transferring of funds. So this, I didn't articulate this particularly well in the agenda, but I was moving kind of fast. This is really just that, a discussion to make everybody aware. Either district can turn this off with 30 days notice.
Okay.
So I presume no action is to be taken on this for today. So we won't ask for a motion in a second, but
It's good to be aware.
good to be aware. And with that, Alex, I will stop talking and give the screen back to you.
Sounds good. Well, I will share it one more time for the last little bit of this. I did see a couple emails from folks regarding access, regarding a passcode. I will certainly formalize this, but a passcode is only necessary for panel members. The code that you see here, copy pasted into URL, would bring you into the meeting. I do see we have several members of the public here today, so I just want to, for anybody who didn't get an opportunity to attend, I'm really sorry. Hopefully, we can work on getting emails out quicker for confusion or whatnot. However, all that to say, all of the access information is here on the agenda for anybody that would like to utilize that. Again, just to reiterate, now that I got my screen shared, it's all right here. Not sure what would have been missing, but certainly we have members of the public that successfully joined. So I'm sorry if there was any confusion. That to be said, moving on to lastly, item 11, other business. Is there any other business that the board would like to discuss today?
Michael, can I ask a
Did you say
question?
there is public on the call?
There are, for my just matter of the record, I have made note of Jay Fisher, JC, Rita Rim, and Lane Malott as members of the public today.
Does the board wish to open up a public comment period before we adjourn?
What is the protocol, Michael?
Yeah, if they want to raise their hand and speak, do we need to open it up, Michael? Give them an opportunity.
Why don't we give them an opportunity, somebody raise their hand if there are any public comments.
Fantastic. Jay, you have the floor.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm pretty new at this stuff. I am I guess you would call a single family home owner.
Okay.
And a little bit confused on some of the stuff that's going on here. I don't understand it. But nonetheless, it's interesting to sit in and watch and try to learn a little bit and pay attention to what's going on in my community.
Well, Jay, I really appreciate that. And one of the things that I enjoy most, I did it what was that, Wednesday of this week. If you have interest in grabbing a cup of coffee, eating somewhere, I can bring down service plan documents, etc. I think, as I mentioned earlier on the call, I think just education and understanding for people who live in metropolitan districts is my personal vendetta and mission. And so if there was an opportunity for the two of us either to have a nice lengthy phone call or enjoy a cup of coffee together, I would welcome the opportunity. Please, Lane, I'm going to move you to panelist real quick so that if you don't mind in the chat, throw in my contact information in there. Phone number, email, Jay, reach out. Let's have a conversation. I would love to.
Uh, uh-oh. I'm a little confused at this stuff. I don't understand how this works, but I
Yeah.
don't know what am I looking for here.
So in the, well, let's do this. So Lane, throw it in the chat, but then let's just make comment of Jay's name, and then Lane, let's touch base right after this and make sure I have contact information from Jay in Appfolio so that I can connect with him. And then again, Jay, if we want to have a phone conversation or meet in person, I'm good either way, just to help answer any questions, whether they be Zoom related or district related. I don't care. I just like to get to know the folks that live in my communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I would appreciate that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I just had one, Johnstown, wonderful individual is going to be on the board here in a couple days, and we had a wonderful conversation. So I would expect the same with you.
Absolutely.
I've confirmed that I've got Jay in Appfolio with contact information, Alex. I can't send him a direct chat, but I'll email him over your contact information.
Oh, you're the man. Thanks so much, Lane.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Jay.
Any other hands that would like to be raised today? Seeing none, I think we're good. Oh, Fred.
I move for adjournment, having no other public comment, or close the public comment. Whatever's next.
Yeah, I don't see any other hands up. So Fred, I would take that as a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Abby? And anybody horribly opposed? Hearing none,
Here.
you guys all have a really great afternoon, and thank you all so much for your attendance, especially the members of the public that were here today. I really appreciate it. And we'll all be in touch
You're still sober today.
soon. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Happy Friday.
We're gonna go for it.